Welcome to the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the world of entrepreneurship.
In this episode, we delve into the fascinating juxtaposition of traditional and modern entrepreneurship practices, exploring the contrasts and synergies that define the old school and new school approaches to business. As we navigate through these differing paradigms, we'll uncover how the foundational principles of entrepreneurship have evolved and how they can coexist and enrich one another in today's dynamic business landscape.
If you're looking to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit and transform your ideas into action, we invite you to follow our podcast.
The Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast is your ultimate launchpad for igniting ideas and skyrocketing your entrepreneurial dreams. Tune in, buckle up, and let's unleash the entrepreneurial spirit within. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Well, hello, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing brilliantly. What about you, Professor Palin?
Oh, very busy as always, and the semester is moving along. We are about 2/3 of the way through.
2/3 is not bad. I'm sure you can smell the end of the semester by now.
I see the light at the end of the tunnel.
There we go.
Ryan, today I wanted to talk about a concept that we addressed in one of our previous episodes. It's talking about traditional styles of dealing with entrepreneurship versus modern styles. And in the vernacular, it's referred to as old school and new school.
There we go. I like it.
What got me thinking about that is I believe we would talk about the Eisenhower matrix, and you had asked me what vehicle I'm using for this, and I made reference to just writing it the old-fashioned way of a piece of paper. It got me thinking, there are some ways old school are viable, but people are discounting them because they're old school.
I can absolutely see that. A lot of times we use the newfangled thing, no matter what it is, and assume it's just better. Whereas sometimes old school is the better way. It's up to the individual to analyze that and figure out which one works for them.
Where my mind went was I was doing some research on students taking quizzes. One of the ways to increase their comprehension is when they're taking notes to handwrite their notes versus typing their notes. I don't know what the exact percentages are, but it's more than double comprehension when they handwrite it. Something happens with the assessment in their brains. But I tell students this, when I see their notes, 99% are still typed. Data is showing handwriting is better, but they think that's old school. That's where my thoughts are on this particular topic of why I thought it would be pertinent to entrepreneurship. There are many applications to use new school, but it's just an example where it can be more effective in isolated issues to use old school. So I thought we could talk about some of the comparisons of old school characteristics and new school characteristics.
And of course, not play off the fact that you probably represent most of the old school ideas and I probably represent most of the new school ideas.
That actually was in my thought also. There are different variations, but I think you and I have done a good job of blending the two.
Absolutely, especially with the distance that we've worked together.
That's really what the overarching message of this particular episode is: take best practices from each and blend them.
Let's get into it.
Old school emphasizes personal relationships, emphasizes face-to-face networking. There's brick and mortar models and more of a cautious approach to growth and investment. Whereas new school embodies a rapid pace of the digital age, agile development, flat organizational structures, innovation, and quick decision-making.
Well, when you put it that way, I think you do display a lot of the characteristics of new school.
I've adapted very well, I believe, but I still in my mind are saying what is best. Another distinction, which I think is really important, there's a schism in how people operate today, is the values. With old school, reliability and consistency was very important. Meticulous planning was paramount. Today, with new school, it's prioritizing scalability, flexibility, and disruption, and rapidly adapting to the changing market. There are situations where both are applicable, but I specifically go with that reliability and consistency from old school. That's a value that we should never lose.
And it's a value that often gets talked about being lost, especially in the construction industry. The number of times someone has told me, oh, things were just built differently. It's wild to hear that, and there has to be some truth behind it because of how pervasive that thought is.
Different methods are a distinction between old school and new school. I lean more towards new school in these particular issues. Like, for example, in old school, it leans towards a manual process, whereas we're using more technology in new school. So, for example, have you ever seen a ledger sheet, Ryan?
I have only on like Google, right? So not in my hands. I've never held one.
Yes, I've done a ledger sheet and I've done business planning with a ledger sheet. That was before you had spreadsheets, and it was torturous. You made one change and you definitely had to write it in pencil because you were erasing everything. Where in a spreadsheet, it just ripples down the changes automatically. Obviously, I lean towards using that type of technology and methods. I don't advise someone to pull out the old ledger sheets if you can find one.
That and it doing the math for you, right? I can't imagine having to manually do math and then, adjust it by one number to test what that does to the math and having to redo it all over again.
I remember the growth of all of those. You think of spreadsheets, you think of Excel. Am I correct?
Yeah, Excel or Sheets, the Google product.
Exactly. Do you know what VisiCalc is?
No, I've never even heard of VisiCalc.
Yeah, VisiCalc was the first spreadsheet that was widely introduced. I did it on my Radio Shack TRS-80, where the operating system was referred to as Trash DOS. You literally had to program the cells yourself.
I'm surprised you weren't using an abacus.
I was using a slide ruler.
A slide ruler. That's too good.
Also different methods. It was more direct marketing in old school. Today, there's a reliance on technology and the internet. I don't automatically discount the old school method of direct marketing. There are places for that in specific niches.
I think about that more of where are your customers than old school versus new school. And maybe that's because you're targeting old school type people. Maybe that is putting an age demographic on what old school is, whereas new school, you're trying to target the younger demographic. And I'm talking holistically there. And that's why you're meeting them where they're at.
We've talked some of the technology adoptions, business model adoptions, marketing strategies can be a distinction, but funding approaches are very different. In old school, funding came from personal savings, family, friends, referred to as the 3 F's of financing, family, friends, and fools, bank loans. Venture capital was less common and typically reserved for later stage growth, where today people are immediately jumping into crowdfunding, angel funding, VCs as a means of moving forward with their investments. I lean at the onset to say, can I use old school first, not immediately jump into new school? Oh, let's crowdfund, let's get angel investment.
So do I, as we've talked about a lot on this podcast and personally with each other. Both of us attack that angle, not necessarily because we're thinking in an old school way, but because we want to maintain as much ownership and influence as we can for as long as we can.
I would agree 100% on that. But that is a totally different mindset from what I'm seeing with a lot of young nascent entrepreneurs.
100%. A lot of that has to do with the quote unquote trendiness. You see these big headlines of unicorn companies getting funding. No matter where you are on the internet, that seems to be a pervasive thing. That leads the average person to believe that that's an open channel for them immediately. Most entrepreneurs will find out that that's a very difficult path, but it is actually available to them. The maturity of that market has increased dramatically over the past 30 years.
Yes.
For those who aspire to go higher in their entrepreneurial journey, we've got something just for you coming up next.
Are you ready to unlock your entrepreneurial potential? Introducing the Janus Entrepreneurial Report, your personalized roadmap to success. In just minutes, discover your unique strengths and areas for growth. Whether you're a seasoned business pro or just starting out, the Janus Entrepreneurial Report will help you identify and leverage your entrepreneurial tendencies. Don't wait, visit ProfSpirit.com and start your journey to success today.
Now, let's dive back into our journey of entrepreneurial insights.
If you're on the old school side, I would look at adopting the new school strategies. Don't be averse to new technologies. My friends, colleagues that are more towards the old school, that's a polite way of saying they're old, or they're my age, another way to look at it, they very much are reticent to adopting new technologies. Whereas I know from our work, you can see I'm very amiable to new technologies and using the most efficient ways.
Oh, I'd say you're aggressive in adopting those technologies.
So if someone's sitting in the old school style, don't be afraid to adopt the new technologies when it makes sense. Don't be afraid of them, in other words.
I would say even don't be scared of it. Just try it out. You don't have to switch your system completely by trying something out, but at least get a level of understanding of what that's helping with so that you can inform conversations around it. Because most likely the people you're working with will be using that new technology, even if it's not your preferred choice.
Definitely. Also, someone in old school shouldn't be afraid to adopt digital marketing and also shouldn't be afraid to adopt innovative business models. For example, like a freemium type of practice or a service-related type of system. We're seeing adoptions with AI technologies for customer support. They shouldn't be afraid to do that. They should look into those.
I'll do a quick pitch for the consultants of the world. And if you totally don't want to do it, bring in a consultant. Have them play the piece that you're unwilling or maybe not able to perform effectively.
Yeah, and those consultants can save you a tremendous amount of time, which is really with this value.
Absolutely, they can. And you don't have to hire them full time. They can come in and piecemeal where they need to play a part to make sure that you're running in the most modern and optimized way possible without you yourself having to do it.
From the flip side, new school entrepreneurs learning from traditional practices. A big one I see is relationship building. That's something I'm seeing a lot of my students and younger entrepreneurs are not taking the time to build their network through relationship building. And they think of networking as they meet people, whereas relationship building takes a lot of communication and contact. It doesn't have to be long communication, but just continual interaction. And then when you need assistance, move in that direction. Previously to recording this, we were just on a Zoom meeting with one of my colleagues and friends that is assisting us with the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment. And that's a long-term relationship I have, and it was very seamless and very helpful.
Very helpful. Absolutely. Consistency is key there. That's where a lot of people fall short on the networking, including me. I'll throw myself in there. It's the most difficult aspect of it, but it's the most important aspect of it.
Now, another one that should be adopted more so that I've seen from observation from new school entrepreneurs is resilience. There tends to be impatience. They want it to happen now. And when they face obstacles, they tend to stop faster than I would see in previous generations. So you must be resilient, facing and overcoming challenges and moving forward.
I like that one a lot. Those lessons can be learned really effectively by people that are operating in an old school fashion.
And the last one I would throw in is meticulous planning. I'm seeing a lack of very detailed planning. We want to rush into it. We want to be first mover. Let's hurry, hurry, hurry. And there could be major holes that you're about to trip into that are not being viewed by doing that planning and a subsequent research with the planning.
I like that one a lot. When I was thinking about this episode, a big one that stood out to me, and maybe this is generalizing, I don't have exact data to back it up, but risk aversiveness, typically in teams that I've operated on, when it's a bunch of new school operators and we've brought in some old school talent, the risk aversiveness can be balanced really effectively between those two, with old school being a little bit more risk averse and new school being more aggressive in that risk.
I agree. The risk component is very important. And there's legitimate reasons for the risk aversion. From a younger person, they have more time to recover and typically less to lose. Where if you're dealing with someone that's longer in the tooth, if you will, there's less time to recover and typically they have more assets to lose. So there's a natural resistance to that. But also experience can help you look at risk from a different component. Been there, done that.
Without a doubt. And that experience is extremely valuable. You can't get that without doing repetitions.
I've spoken with many individuals that are insistent on taking a specific path and very much in I would say almost a sarcastic mode. I will say, well, why don't you try it your way? And then in a year or two, come back and talk to me when you find out it doesn't work.
Do they often come back?
Sometimes, yes. But instead of banging my head against the wall trying to convince them, I'll say, well, there's two ways to learn this, the easy way or the hard way. If you're insisting on learning the hard way, go for it. I have no objection to that.
I love it.
Okay, now I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
What old school value or practice do you think is the most important for modern entrepreneurs to adopt?
I've kind of already said it, but I think that risk aversiveness. New school entrepreneurs that I talk to are firing from the hip. Sometimes they get a lucky shot in, But I think that's exactly what it is. It's kind of a lucky shot. Whereas bringing in that old school philosophy of being more risk adverse, hitting the target 9 out of 10 times instead of 1 out of 10 times will ultimately drive the business farther, faster, even though it may seem like you're going slower during that process.
Excellent. Before we conclude, any final thoughts, observations that you would like to make?
This is a really cool vernacular. In practice, there's a blending between this old school and new school, but just being aware of what is newfangled and trendy and just knowing that so that you're not diving on board with this, even if it's not going to last for a long time. So you can look back on history and see what's considered old school, and it's probably because it works well.
I would conclude with saying I encourage entrepreneurs to be open to learn from both worlds, adopting strategies that best fit your business goals and whatever market landscape that you're approaching. That blend will make you stronger.
Well, let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
As we wrap up another episode of the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, we extend our gratitude for your presence and attention. Your dedication to the entrepreneurial spirit fuels our passion for creating this podcast. Check out ProfSpirit.com to discover resources and courses designed specifically for innovators like you. Stay on the cutting edge by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms as it is released. Until then, keep the entrepreneurial flame burning.